Sometimes the quietest wars are the most destructive, and in this story, nobody saw it coming, not even the people standing in the middle of it. Martell and Hill Harper were two men at the top of their game. Both ambitious, both charismatic, both seemingly aligned on the same path to success. On paper, they were a perfect match, partners, collaborators, respected by their peers, sharing stages and opportunities, exchanging praise in public. To outsiders, they looked unstoppable. They laughed at the same events, posed for the same photos, and even seemed to have mutual respect that could weather any challenge. But the truth was far more complicated. Behind the carefully curated smiles, a silent tension was brewing. A tension fueled not by money, not by status, but by something far more volatile: influence. This is the story of how two powerful personalities collided and how one woman, Melody, became trapped in the crossfire of a quiet war that would spiral far beyond anyone's expectations. Martell's energy was immediate, loud, unapologetic. He didn't just enter a room, he claimed it. Every movement, every word, every gesture radiated confidence and power. People noticed him, and whether they admired him or feared him, no one ignored him. Hill Harper, in contrast, moved with quiet precision. His approach was calm, calculated, measured. He spoke in ways that suggested he had thought through every single word, as if each sentence were part of a chapter in a best-selling book he had yet to write. The difference between Martell and Hill wasn't just personality, it was strategy. And when two forces like that coexist in the same orbit, the clash is inevitable. But what made this collision dangerous wasn't a single fight or public confrontation. It was the slow, simmering tension that grows unnoticed until it's too late. And no one, least of all Melody, was prepared for what came next. Melody had always been a stabilizing presence in their world. She wasn't just admired for her looks or her presence. She was respected for her intelligence, her composure, and her ability to navigate high-pressure environments without creating drama. Both Martell and Hill trusted her, confided in her, and included her in professional spaces where others might have been left out. But being close to two powerful men with strong egos can be perilous. It isn't just uncomfortable, it can be explosive. And when both of them began vying, subtly but consistently, for control over the narrative, Melody was thrust into a position where neutrality was almost impossible. Her role as the connective tissue between these two men turned her into a lightning rod for tension that neither Martell nor Hill could fully manage on their own. And like any storm, the first signs were subtle, almost imperceptible. Questions began casually, innocuous at first, but gradually more pointed. "So, you and Hill talk often?" Martell asked. "What does he think about our project?" At first, Melody assumed there was nothing to worry about. But soon, the questions became sharper, more frequent, and loaded with meaning. Hill, never overtly confrontational, responded with his own subtle digs. Comments about Martell's style, questions that planted doubt without ever saying it outright. For Melody, the tension was palpable, like an invisible weight she could feel pressing down on her shoulders. She tried to ignore it, telling herself they're grown men. This isn't my business. But when you are the central figure connecting two competing forces, tension inevitably finds a way to pull you into its orbit. The turning point came at an event that was meant to be nothing more than a casual networking gathering. Business owners, creators, and influencers gathered in a dimly lit, swanky lounge, sharing drinks and ideas, trying to create connections without knowing the storm brewing beneath the surface. Martell and Hill both arrived looking pristine, smiling for cameras, shaking hands, nodding politely to acquaintances. On the surface, everything was normal. But those who were paying attention sensed it immediately. The tension didn't erupt in a dramatic confrontation. It began with a look, subtle but loaded. Martell locked eyes with Hill after overhearing a remark that didn't sit right with him, probably a comment Hill had made about leadership, a critique Martell perceived as personal. What followed was a controlled escalation, voices rising not in shouts, but in sharp, precise statements that carried weight in every syllable. Melody tried to intervene, placing a hand on Martell's arm to calm him, hoping to prevent a scene without drawing attention. But the moment was already irreversible. The energy shifted, conversations stopped, phones stayed down, and everyone in the room felt the tremor of what had once been a quiet tension turning overt. That night marked the transition from private friction to a conflict with public implications. What had once been subtle and easily ignored became undeniable, and Melody found herself once again at the center, trying to hold together pieces of a relationship that was rapidly unraveling. In the days that followed, the consequences of that night rippled outward in ways no one could have predicted. Gossip spread like wildfire. Group chats lit up with speculation. DMs multiplied with questions. Everyone who had been present that evening had their own version of events, each story amplifying the tension. Martell's supporters claimed Hill had been undermining him for weeks, questioning his credibility behind his back. Hill's circle insisted Martell was reckless and emotional, bringing personal drama into professional spaces. And in the middle, Melody became the accidental centerpiece of the conflict. Rumors circulated about her loyalty, her intentions, her role in the tension. Was she playing both sides? Was she manipulating the situation? None of it was true. Melody had never betrayed either man. In fact, she had spent months acting as a buffer, holding back details, smoothing over disagreements, and trying to prevent the friction from erupting in public. But once suspicion enters a narrative, facts become optional, and suddenly she was cast as the problem she had been trying to prevent. Martell, already feeling cornered, turned to social media. He posted cryptic messages, hinting at disloyalty and hidden agendas, never naming names, but making it clear to everyone who was paying attention who he meant. Hill Harper chose a different path. Calm, polished, strategic, he avoided social media confrontation entirely. Instead, he spoke on podcasts and interviews about authenticity, respect, and the dangers of ego in relationships, subtly defending himself while undermining Martell's credibility without overtly saying so. Behind the scenes, Melody's world was unraveling. Her phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Friends called, colleagues pressed, and even mutual associates began hesitating, unsure whether to engage or distance themselves. The pressure weighed on her like a storm cloud that refused to pass, each message, each conversation reinforcing the reality that she was trapped in the crossfire of two forces much larger than herself. Then came the revelation that changed everything. Melody stumbled across a series of messages, conversations she wasn't meant to see. Initially, she thought they were casual discussions between Hill and a mutual friend. But as she read deeper, the truth became undeniable. Hill had made a strategic business move months earlier, one that completely undermined Martell's proposal to a major investor. He had secured the deal quietly, using insider knowledge only a few people had access to, and never informed Martell. This wasn't just an ego clash anymore. It was calculated, cold, and deliberate. Melody froze as the pieces clicked into place, remembering Martell's frustration, his sense of betrayal, and Hill's perfectly timed smiles and nods. The stakes had just shifted. What had been a personal, simmering conflict had turned into a deliberate game of strategy, with Melody unknowingly holding the evidence that could ignite a full-blown public confrontation. Melody faced an impossible decision. If she told Martell, she risked unleashing a firestorm she could not control. If she stayed silent, she would be protecting someone who had manipulated the situation for their own gain. The weight of the decision was immense. She wrestled with guilt, fear, and the knowledge that no matter what she chose, the outcome could be catastrophic for everyone involved. Finally, after nights of restless sleep and agonizing over every possible consequence, she sent Martell a single simple message: "We need to talk in person." The words were unremarkable, but the implications were monumental. This conversation could either restore some semblance of truth or push the conflict to an irreparable level. When Martell arrived, the tension was palpable. No greetings, no small talk, just a silent acknowledgement of what was about to happen. Melody showed him everything: messages, dates, names, the full picture of the calculated maneuver by Hill. Martell read in silence, expression neutral at first, but the quiet intensity of his reaction spoke volumes. No outburst, no dramatics, just a nod and a decision that would change the public landscape of their conflict. Within 24 hours, Martell went public, detailing the timeline of the failed deal and referencing a close associate who had manipulated the process. Names weren't mentioned, but the message was unmistakable. Hill's response was polished, dismissive, and strategic, but the seed had been planted. The public began piecing together the truth. Fans, observers, and insiders dug through timelines and receipts. Slowly, Hill's previously untouchable reputation began to crack. Through it all, Melody stayed quiet, her role invisible to the public eye, but the emotional toll was immense. Friends drifted, opportunities paused, and her trust in others and herself was tested in ways she had never anticipated. Weeks later, Martell reached out to her once more, not with anger, but with honesty. He admitted he was tired of games, posturing, and constant strategizing. Melody listened, but she had nothing left to give. Not to Martell, not to Hill, not to the version of herself that had once believed she could hold peace in the storm. Hill, by contrast, never reached out. Not a single word of gratitude, acknowledgement, or reconciliation. The war had left her changed, marked by the chaos she had tried to mediate, and by the realization that some conflicts, no matter how silent, echo for years. In the end, this was a story not about money, fame, or status. It was a story about ego, influence, and the dangerous power of pride. About what happens when grown men allow competition to cloud judgment. About the weight placed on those caught in the middle. And about how one quiet war can leave scars that no one ever sees, until it's too late. So the question remains, who really wins when pride and ego collide?